tonight. We're stepping into a place that feels safe. Your backyard. The one you grew up in. The one you think you know. But what if someone else knows it too? What if they've been watching, waiting, right on the other side of the fence? From something hiding just beyond the trees, to a locked shed that should have stayed closed, to a swing that moves when no one's there. These are 3 scary true backyard horror stories, designed to make you question what's just outside your door. So before we begin, turn off the lights, put your phone down, and listen closely. Because after this, you might never look at your backyard the same way again. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed to Dark Side Rewind for more true scary stories uploaded every week. And with that said, let's get into these 3 scary true backyard horror stories. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Columbus. It was one of those places where everyone knew each other just enough to wave, but not enough to ask questions. Our backyard was probably the best part of the house. It wasn't huge, but it backed up into a stretch of overgrown land that no one really owned, or at least no one maintained. There was an old wooden fence separating our yard from it, but parts of that fence had started to rot and collapse over the years. My dad always said he'd fix it eventually, but like most things, it never really got done. When I was around 13, I got really into gardening. Not in a normal way either, I mean like obsessive. I'd spend hours out there planting random vegetables, digging up patches of dirt, rearranging things. It was my space. My parents thought it was a good hobby, something that kept me outside and off video games. There was one section of the yard I avoided though, the back right corner where the fence was the most damaged. A few planks had completely fallen off, leaving a wide gap that opened into that overgrown land behind our house. You could see maybe 10 or 15 feet into it before the brush got too thick. I don't know why, but that spot always made me uncomfortable. It wasn't like I saw anything back there. It just felt wrong. Like if I stared too long, I'd see something I wasn't supposed to. One afternoon in early summer, I was out there watering the plants. It was probably around 6 or 7 p.m. The sun was starting to go down, casting those long orange shadows across the yard. Everything was quiet, just the sound of the hose and the occasional birds. That's when I heard it. A soft rustling sound coming from that broken part of the fence. At first, I thought it was just an animal. We'd get raccoons and stray cats sometimes, so I didn't think much of it. But then it happened again. Not like something moving through bushes. More like something shifting its weight. Slow. Careful. I turned toward the fence and just stood there holding the hose. "Hello?" I called out. No response. The rustling stopped immediately. That should have been my cue to go inside, but instead I stepped closer. I don't know why. Curiosity, I guess. Or maybe I just didn't want to seem scared, even though no one else was around. I got within maybe 10 feet of the gap in the fence and stopped. That feeling hit me again. That same heavy, watching feeling. Like I wasn't alone anymore. I stared into the opening, trying to see past the tall weeds and tangled branches. It was darker back there compared to the yard, like the sunlight just didn't reach it the same way. And then I saw something. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, but it moved, just slightly, like someone leaning back behind a tree. I froze. "Is someone there?" I said, louder this time. Still nothing. No footsteps. No leaves crunching. No voice. Just silence. After a few seconds, I convinced myself I was imagining things. I turned off the hose, coiled it up, and went inside. I didn't tell my parents. I figured it was nothing. But that night, I couldn't sleep. My bedroom window faced the backyard, and from my bed, I could see that broken section of the fence if I looked at the right angle. I kept glancing at it, every few minutes, just expecting to see something. Around midnight, I remember finally starting to drift off when I heard a sound. A knock, not on my door, on the window. I opened my eyes immediately. For a second, I didn't move. I just listened. Then it happened again. 3 soft taps against the glass. My heart started racing. I slowly turned my head toward the window, and that's when I saw it. A hand, pressed flat against the outside of the glass. I couldn't see the person attached to it, just the hand. Pale, long fingers, slightly bent like it was gripping the window. I shot up in bed and scrambled backwards. The moment I moved, the hand disappeared. I sat there frozen, staring at the window. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear anything at all. After what felt like forever, I ran out of my room and into my parents' room, waking them up and trying to explain what I saw. My dad grabbed a flashlight and went outside to check. There was nothing. No one. The yard was empty. The next morning, my dad checked around the house. There were no footprints, no signs of anyone being there. He told me it was probably just a dream, but I knew it wasn't because of what I found later that day. I went outside to check on my garden like usual, trying to act normal. But as soon as I stepped into the yard, something felt off. The dirt in one of my garden beds had been disturbed. Not like an animal digging. More deliberate, like someone had been using their hands. I walked over and crouched down. And that's when I saw it, buried just beneath the surface. A small object. I brushed away the dirt and pulled it out. It was a photograph. Old, slightly torn at the edges. It was a picture of me, standing in the backyard, taken from behind. I was maybe 20 feet away from the broken fence, watering the plants. The angle of the photo made it obvious where it had been taken from, the other side of the fence. My stomach dropped. I ran back inside and showed my parents. This time, they took it seriously. My dad called the police, and they came out to take a report. They searched the area behind our house, but didn't find anything. No camps, no belongings, no sign that anyone had been staying back there. But I knew someone had, and they'd been watching me. After that, my parents finally fixed the fence. Not just patched it, completely replaced it with a tall, solid wooden barrier. For a while, things went back to normal. No more noises. No more strange feelings. Until about 2 weeks later, I was home alone. It was early evening again, almost the same time as before. I was in the kitchen when I heard something from the backyard. A dull thud, like something hitting wood. I froze. Then it came again. Thud, thud, slow, rhythmic. I didn't want to look, but I did. I walked over to the back door and looked out through the glass. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I noticed it, right where the old broken section of the fence used to be. One of the new wooden panels was moving, not swinging open, shaking, like something on the other side was hitting it, over and over. I stood there, unable to move, and then it stopped. Everything went quiet. I waited. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, nothing. I started to back away from the door when suddenly, a loud crack split through the yard. One of the wooden panels splintered inward. A hand forced its way through the broken wood. The same pale hand I saw on my window. Fingers stretching, grasping at the air. I ran. I didn't even think. I just ran out of the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and locked myself in the bathroom. I called my dad first, then the police. By the time anyone got there, whoever it was had already left. But the damage was still there. A section of the fence completely broken through, and on the inside of the wood, deep scratch marks, like someone had been trying to claw their way in. The police took it seriously this time. They searched the entire area behind our house, even bringing in K-9 units. They didn't find the person, but they did find something else. About 30 yards into the overgrown land, hidden beneath a pile of branches, a small makeshift setup. Not a tent, not a camp, just a flattened area with trash, empty bottles, and more photographs. Dozens of them. All of me, in the backyard. Some taken during the day, some at night, some from angles that shouldn't have been possible unless that person had been inside our yard at some point. After that, we didn't stay in that house much longer. We moved within the month. My parents never told me everything the police found, but I remember one thing my dad said before we left. He told me that whoever was out there had probably been watching for a long time, maybe even before I ever noticed that broken fence. And the part that still gets to me is that the first photo they found of me was taken months before I ever started gardening, which means I wasn't the reason they were watching. I was just the one who noticed. I used to spend my summers at my uncle's house in Asheville. He lived just outside the main town, up in a more wooded area where houses were spaced out and surrounded by thick trees. His property was huge compared to what I was used to: front yard, backyard, and then a long stretch of land that just kind of faded into the woods. The backyard itself was nice. Open grass, a fire pit, a couple lawn chairs, and a small wooden shed near the tree line. That shed always stood out to me. Not because it looked creepy or anything, just because it was always locked. My uncle wasn't the type to be secretive. He was pretty laid back, always grilling, always joking around. But for whatever reason, that shed was off limits. Every time I asked what was in it, he'd just brush it off and say something like, "Just old tools," or "Nothing you'd care about." But he always made it clear, "Don't go in there." I was 16 that summer, old enough to not be told what to do, but still young enough to be curious about everything, especially something I wasn't allowed to mess with. The first weird thing happened a few days after I got there. It was late afternoon. I was in the backyard tossing a baseball around by myself, just killing time. My uncle had gone into town to pick something up, so I was alone. At one point, I threw the ball a little too far, and it rolled toward the tree line, right near the shed. I jogged over to grab it, but as I got closer, I heard something. A faint noise, coming from inside the shed. I stopped. It sounded like movement, not loud. Just a subtle shifting sound, like something brushing against wood or dragging lightly across the floor. I stood there for a second, listening. Then it stopped. Completely. I walked up to the shed door and just stared at it. There was a heavy padlock on the latch, rusted but solid. The windows were small and dirty, too fogged up to see through clearly. "Hello?" I called out, half joking. No response. I felt stupid almost immediately. It was probably nothing. Maybe an animal got in somehow. Or maybe the wind shifted something inside. I grabbed the baseball and headed back toward the house. But the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That night, I asked my uncle again about the shed. "Are you sure it's just tools in there?" I said. He didn't even look up from the TV. "Yeah." "Why?" "I thought I heard something inside earlier." That got his attention. He muted the TV and looked at me. "What kind of something?" "I don't know. Like movement, scraping or something." There was a pause. Then he just nodded slowly and said, "Probably a raccoon. Happens sometimes." He unmuted the TV, and that was it. But something about the way he said it didn't sit right with me. The next day, I went back out there. I told myself I was just going to check around the outside, make sure there wasn't a hole or anything an animal could have gotten through. The shed was right up against the trees, so the ground around it was uneven, covered in leaves and roots. I circled around the back and sides, looking for any openings. There weren't any. No broken panels. No gaps. Nothing. But as I came back around to the front, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The padlock was different. It wasn't the same rusty one from yesterday. This one looked newer, cleaner, like it had been replaced. I just stood there staring at it. I didn't hear my uncle come outside, but suddenly he was behind me. "What are you doing?" he asked. I turned around quickly. "Nothing. Just checking for animals." He glanced at the shed, then back at me. "You don't need to worry about that," he said. There was a firmness in his voice this time, something I hadn't heard from him before. "Stay out of here, all right?" I nodded. But now I was more curious than ever. That night, I couldn't sleep. My room was on the second floor, facing the backyard. From the window, I could see the shed, barely visible through the darkness and trees. I don't know what made me look, but around 2 a.m., I woke up and glanced out the window, and I saw a light. A faint, flickering light coming from inside the shed. I sat up in bed. The light moved slightly, like a candle or a flashlight shifting around. There was no way that was a raccoon. I got out of bed and moved closer to the window. That's when I saw something else. The shed door was open, just slightly, enough to see the light coming from inside. And then a shadow moved across the opening. I froze. It wasn't my uncle. It was too tall, too thin, and it moved in a way that didn't look normal. Not like someone just walking around, more like swaying. I backed away from the window slowly. Every instinct in my body was telling me not to go outside. So I didn't. I stayed in my room the rest of the night, barely sleeping. The next morning, I went downstairs and acted normal. My uncle was in the kitchen making coffee. "Morning," he said. "Morning." I hesitated for a second. "Did you go into the shed last night?" He paused, just for a second, then shook his head. "No." "Why?" I thought I saw a light out there. He stared at me for a moment. Then he smiled. A light? Yeah, like inside the shed. He let out a small laugh. You were probably dreaming. I didn't push it, but I knew what I saw. Later that day, my uncle left again to run errands. This time, I didn't hesitate. The moment his car was gone, I grabbed a screwdriver from the garage and headed straight for the shed. The new padlock was still there. I knelt down and started working at it, trying to pry it open. It took a few minutes, but eventually, I managed to loosen it enough for it to slip off. My heart was pounding. I grabbed the handle and slowly pulled the door open. The smell hit me first. Not rotten, but stale, like something had been closed up for a long time, with no fresh air. Inside, it was darker than I expected. No windows except the small ones, and they barely let any light in. At first glance, it did look like a normal shed. Tools, old boxes, gardening stuff. But then I noticed the floor. There was a section in the middle that looked different. The wood was slightly raised, like a panel. I stepped inside and walked over to it. Kneeling down, I ran my hand along the edge. There was a small groove, enough to get my fingers under. I lifted, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't just a panel. It was a trapdoor. I opened it slowly. Underneath was a narrow set of wooden steps leading down into darkness. And I could hear something, breathing, slow, heavy, coming from below. I slammed the trapdoor shut immediately and stumbled backward. My heart was racing so fast I thought I was going to pass out. There was someone down there. There had to be. I didn't think. I just ran. Out of the shed, back into the house, locking the door behind me. I grabbed my phone and called my uncle. He didn't answer. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to call the police right then, but something stopped me. I don't know why. Maybe I was scared of what it would mean. Maybe I didn't want to believe it. About 20 minutes later, I heard my uncle's truck pull into the driveway. I stayed inside. I didn't go out to greet him like usual. I just waited. A few minutes passed. Then I heard the back door open. Footsteps. He walked into the house. "Hey," he called out. I didn't answer. Then I heard it. The shed door opening. I moved slowly to the back window and looked out. My uncle was standing in front of the shed, the door wide open. He looked inside for a few seconds. Then he stepped in and closed the door behind him. I don't know how long he was in there. It felt like forever. Eventually, he came back out, closed the door, and this time, he didn't lock it. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, watching that shed, waiting. Around 3 a.m., the door opened again, but it wasn't my uncle. Something stepped out, tall, thin, barely visible in the darkness. It stood there for a few seconds, then slowly turned and looked directly at the house, at my window. I dropped to the floor immediately. I didn't look again. The next morning, I told my parents everything. They came and picked me up that same day. I never went back to that house again. I tried asking my uncle about it years later. He denied everything, said I must have imagined it. But I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. There was something in that shed, something that didn't belong there. And the worst part is, I don't think my uncle was keeping it locked to keep it in. I think he was trying to keep it hidden. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside of Des Moines. It was one of those cookie-cutter areas where every house looked almost identical. Every lawn was trimmed, and every backyard had some version of the same setup: grass, maybe a deck, and if you were lucky, a swing set. We had one of those swing sets. It sat in the far corner of our backyard, right near a line of tall hedges that separated our property from the house behind us. The hedges were thick, almost like a wall of leaves, and they blocked most of the view into the neighbor's yard. I used that swing set all the time when I was younger, but this story takes place when I was 17. By then, I didn't use it anymore. It was just there, old, slightly rusted, creaking whenever the wind hit it just right. The only reason I even paid attention to it anymore was because of what started happening late at night. It began one summer when I started staying up really late. School was out, my sleep schedule was completely messed up, and I'd usually be up until 2 or 3 in the morning just on my phone or watching videos. My room was on the second floor, and my window faced the backyard. One night, around 2:30 a.m., I heard something. A faint, rhythmic creaking sound. At first, I ignored it. Houses make noises at night, especially older ones. But then I realized it wasn't coming from inside. It was coming from outside, from the backyard. I sat up in bed and listened more closely. Creak, pause, creak, pause. It was steady, consistent, like something moving back and forth. I got up and walked over to the window. I didn't turn on the lights. I just pulled the curtain back slightly and looked out. The backyard was dim, lit only by the faint glow of the streetlights and a bit of moonlight. And that's when I saw it. The swing, moving, back and forth, slowly. At first, I told myself it was the wind, but the trees weren't moving. The hedges were completely still, and the swing was moving too perfectly, like someone was sitting on it. I leaned closer to the window, trying to see better, and that's when my stomach dropped. There was someone on the swing, a figure, sitting there, facing away from the house. Long hair, hanging down, completely still except for the motion of the swing. I froze. Every instinct in my body told me to step back, to look away, but I couldn't. I just stood there staring, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Who would be in our backyard at this time? How did they get in? I thought about waking my parents, but something about the way that figure sat there, it didn't feel normal. It didn't feel like a person who just wandered in. It felt wrong. After maybe 20 seconds, the swing started slowing down. The creaking got quieter, the movement smaller, until it stopped completely. The figure was just sitting there now, not moving, not turning, just sitting. And then, slowly, very slowly, the head tilted, not turning around, just tilting, like it was listening or noticing something. My heart started pounding. I stepped back from the window. I didn't want it to see me. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but eventually I forced myself to look again. The swing was empty. The backyard was completely still. No one was there. The next morning, I checked the yard. There were no footprints, no signs that anyone had been there. I told myself it was my imagination, a trick of the light, something I half dreamed. But then it happened again. 2 nights later, same time, same sound. Creak, pause, creak. This time, I didn't even hesitate. I went straight to the window, and there it was again. The swing, moving, and the same figure, sitting on it, facing away. I felt that same dread wash over me, but this time, I noticed something different. The hair, it wasn't moving at all. Even with the swing going back and forth, it just hung there, perfectly still, like it wasn't affected by the motion. I don't know why, but that detail scared me more than anything else. I watched for a few seconds longer, and then the swing stopped. Suddenly, no slowing down this time, just stopped, like something grabbed it. The figure's head tilted again, but this time, a little further, at an angle that didn't look natural. And then it started to turn, slowly, toward the house, toward me. I dropped to the floor instantly. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it could hear it. I didn't look again that night. I couldn't. The next day, I told my parents. They didn't believe me. They said it was probably just someone messing around, maybe a neighbor's kid. But I knew that wasn't it. That night, my dad decided to stay up and watch. He sat in the living room with the back lights off, looking out through the glass door that faced the yard. I stayed upstairs, in my room, watching from my window again. Around 2:30, it started, the creaking. I looked out. The swing was moving, but this time, there was no one on it. At least, not at first. I frowned, confused. Then I noticed something. The swing wasn't just moving, it was being pushed from behind. But there was nothing there, no person, no shape, just empty space. And yet, every time the swing moved forward, it was like something invisible was pushing it. I felt a chill run down my spine. Then, the swing suddenly stopped, and in the next second, the figure was there, sitting on it, like it had just appeared. I gasped and stumbled back. At that exact moment, I heard my dad yell from downstairs, What the hell? Then silence. I ran out of my room and down the stairs. Dad? No response. I reached the living room. He was standing by the glass door, frozen, staring outside. What is it? I asked. He didn't answer. He just slowly pointed. I followed his finger and looked. The swing was still. But something else was wrong. The hedges, right behind the swing, they were moving. Not from the wind, but like something was pushing through them. From the other side, the branches bent outward, slowly, like something was forcing its way through. And then a hand emerged, pale, thin, gripping the branches, pulling them apart. My dad grabbed me and pulled me back. We both just stood there, watching. The hand disappeared. The hedges slowly fell back into place. Everything went still again. The next day, my dad cut down part of those hedges. He wanted to see what was behind them, what was on the other side. When he cleared enough to see through, we realized something. There was no yard behind ours, no house, no fence, just more land, empty, overgrown. And in the spot directly behind where the swing sat, there was a patch of dirt, disturbed, like something had been dug up or buried. My parents called the police. They came out, checked the area, and ended up digging in that spot. I wasn't there when they did it, but I heard what they found. Bones, old ones, buried shallow. They said it looked like it had been there for years. No one ever figured out who it belonged to. After that, we got rid of the swing set, completely removed it from the yard. And for a while, everything stopped. No more noises, no more movement. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. That same creaking sound, slow, rhythmic, coming from a backyard that no longer has a swing. And every time I hear it, I can't help but feel like something is still out there, waiting for someone to sit down. Those were 3 scary true backyard horror stories. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. It really helps the channel. And if you're new here, subscribe for more real, disturbing stories uploaded regularly. I upload new horror videos every week, so turn on notifications if you don't want to miss them. If you have your own scary experience you'd like to share, you can send it in. Your story might be featured in a future video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.